Here are the latest snowfall totals from the National Weather Service from this snowstorm we've been tracking over the last couple of days. And looking at the legend up above my head here, we've had some pretty significant totals coming out of New Mexico as well as into Colorado here. And that swung into Kansas, but then into the Texas Panhandle yesterday around the Amarillo region, anywhere from 4 to 6 inches, towards Lubbock, another 6 to 8 inches. But then there's the bullseye yesterday in Plainview, Texas, 14 inches of snowfall. And now that swung off into southeastern portions of Oklahoma. Fell a couple of inches, fell around the Oklahoma City region last night. And now this morning, that is snowing into the Tulsa region. So I appreciate all my subscribers out there. I do daily breakdowns on a daily basis. So if you are new here, definitely hit the subscribe button and follow along so I can keep you well ahead of the storm. So taking a look at the setup going forward, we've got the dirty side. That's the severe side. And these little triangles here, that is the storm reports that left all the significant hail down there in East Texas, golf ball to even some reports of tennis ball size hail towards the Longview region in and around the Shreveport region. Then that continued to swing in towards Louisiana. And now this morning, they do in fact have a tornado watch unfolding across southeastern portions of Alabama into Georgia. That's where the main setup this afternoon for more severe storms and unfortunately isolated tornadoes. But then there's our winter storm where the snow is flying coming out of Oklahoma. Now that's going to be shifting into Arkansas. And then of course they have winter weather advisories elongated into western portions of Tennessee, back into Kentucky. But then further north, this system has taken actually a dramatic shift further south. So it puts these areas further north less into play and actually increased some of these snowfall totals, especially into the New York City region, where now they're potentially expecting around 8 inches of snowfall. So here's the warm sector further south. We are concerned about some more severe storms later on this afternoon. That's why the Storm Prediction Center does in fact have that slight risk or severe storms. Could in fact have some larger hail, but definitely an isolated tornado or two within this sector from New Orleans to Mobile to Montgomery all the way to Tallahassee into the Columbia region. That favored areas into southeastern portions of Georgia where they could have a spin up tornado or two. So definitely just be on high alert, especially into the later half into the afternoon, where some of these could turn bumpy into the daytime heating time frame. But here's the setup. And yes, like I mentioned, this thing has shifted a little bit further south. So it definitely pulls this piece of energy a tad bit further south. It's all about the track of this upper level low. And where that low is, obviously you're going to have areas that overperform, like what happened yesterday in Plainview, Texas. But it should, continue to snow there into southeastern portions of Missouri, back into Arkansas. But there's the low pressure that's complements of all the heavier rains and some of the severe storms on the warmer side of this track. But the colder side brings the heavier snows now into western Tennessee, and that will eventually swing into the Kentucky region as this low pressure is just right there south of West Virginia. And that's going to take a storm track a lot further south than what some of the latest guidance was actually hinting at yesterday, because we do actually see a pretty significant dip in the overall low pressure center going forward. And that's going to set up shop a lot further south and put more of these areas further south into play and less of these areas back into Maine, less areas into New York, and actually less areas, at least on the northern side of Pennsylvania, getting a lot less snowfall than what it looked like just yesterday with this more southern track. Because you look at all the guidance now, a lot of the low pressure, a lot of the ensembles are kind of hinting at right there just south of New Jersey here. Most of the guidance has that low pressure center just hanging off the coast. So yes, that definitely puts more areas with higher totals in a slower system, more compact, more significant totals. Some of these totals are quite impressive, and some areas are actually going to be getting their biggest snows of the winter with this particular setup for coming in on Monday night into Tuesday timeframe. There it is on the latest high resolution guidance coming off into portions of Kentucky now, snowing back into southern portions of Ohio, but going into those areas into central and southern portions of Pennsylvania. That swings into New Jersey and definitely gets more into play for New York City and Long Island, as well as back into Connecticut and Massachusetts, and actually into Rhode Island now, with higher totals even into the Boston region, especially as this low pressure center will be down to a 975 millibar. That's just going to be cranking out the snow. Some areas actually, in fact, could see some 2 to 3 inch per hour snowfall rates in a short amount of time. So it's going to come in fast and furious, and a lot of areas actually going to be getting a foot of snow now with this snowstorm that will continue to unfold overall about 12 hours time frame. I think it mainly starts around midnight into that Monday night time frame, but heading into that noon time frame, then even extending into the later afternoon, all the way into Long Island here, back into Massachusetts, into Rhode Island, into the Boston region. That's where they upped the ante on some of these totals and increased them another couple of inches than what it was actually looking like just yesterday. So here's the latest update from the National Weather Service. So you got that storm track a little bit further south. It definitely puts back into Kentucky more into play with the dusting to a couple of inches of snow, southern portions of Ohio, back into West Virginia, but getting less of portions of western PA and more of central and southern portions of PA with this particular system, as this is going to be cranking out a good 6 to 12 inch swath within this pink shaded area. And yes, that does in fact include the New York City region, where they were only looking at like 1 to 3 inches. Now we're talking 8 inches of snow around Central Park there in New York City, and then up the ante into the Providence region of 10 inches, back in Boston around 11 inches. So yes, definitely some totals have definitely increased with this snowstorm. And if we look at and kind of zoom in some of these totals from the National Weather Service, they've got Middletown up to 12 to 18 inches of snow now, back into these orange shaded areas. But even further south, right, New York puts up 6 to 8 inches. There's New York City, another 8 inches of snow, even into Islip down to 4 to 6 inches, and to West Hampton another 4 to 6 inches. And then further north, again, a good swath of 8 to 12 inches of snow with this snowstorm. And I think it all lasts a good 12 to likely 18 hours in some spots, as this will be pushing off into that Tuesday evening time frame. But what's behind that, right? So we got definitely a warmer, so this comes through. We are going to get a little bit of a warm up further south, so temperatures should moderate pretty nicely further south in these southern areas for most of the week as the atmosphere starts to dry out. But we do have several areas of instability. One here coming into the Dakotas. Another one's going to come off the west, the Pacific Northwest, and then yes, we have another one. So this is going to be the storm track after this storm comes in on Thursday. That's where it's going to be laying down a renewed snow, across these regions. So if we look at some of the surface map, you can see the snow coming back in the picture by Thursday, back into portions of Wisconsin, into the upper Great Lakes, into Michigan here. Then there's that second piece of energy coming on board into the Pacific Northwest, through Washington and Oregon, back into Idaho again, and back into Montana. If we kind of move it forward, we've got these systems that we traversing across this boundary. And yes, we're talking more snow by the time we set up on Friday morning across these regions into Pennsylvania, into New York, and yes, those areas back into Massachusetts and into Connecticut, back into Rhode Island again, back into the Boston region. Could likely pick up some more snow from this deal by the time we head into that Friday morning time frame. But we do see a stronger cold front going to be lifting, coming out of the north, shifting further south back into the southern plains and again into the southeast. This all takes place on Friday night, but especially as we go during the day on Sunday, Saturday, those temperatures are going to be falling big time, and we should see widespread 40s for highs, especially further south into Texas as this colder air pushes in. And that's exactly what the Climate Prediction Center kind of highlights here. We are going to be seeing a lot of the rain start to come back for the West Coast. That's going to be a warmer rain for them. That elongates the cold essentially east of the Continental Divide and puts that colder anomalies. I don't see like a Arctic blast or anything like that, but definitely colder for this time of year than what you typically see for the middle part of February. But that definitely puts within the warm sector, that definitely puts California and the West Coast back into play. So they had about a 10-day rain spell there, and now they had a couple of day reprieve, and now the rains start to come back. And I think this comes back with a vengeance starting on Saturday, Sunday, and heading into early next week with more significant rains definitely back onto the table, as we'll have more rain start to come back for those areas back into Florida, as much of the Ohio Valley starts to dry out on the drier side. This is after that little clipper system comes through. But overall, you can see what we're talking about here. We've got several pieces of energy, and it's almost like the trifecta pieces of energy. We've got one, we've got two, and then yet we have a third one. So this is why the Climate Prediction Center is highlighting pretty significant rains coming back into the picture, because this one dives into the West Coast first. This one dives in second, and then we have yet another one that will be trailing behind that one. So it's going to be several days, likely more flood warnings across that region. I'm not thinking about any significance of what they saw last time for those two atmospheric river events, but we are going to be sending some pretty healthy totals, across that region. But that won't actually start until the end of next weekend and heading into early next week. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update where I protect you before and after the storm.